All signs point to a secret chakra nature in Naruto that only the Otsutsuki know about, but anyone can learn to use in order to travel between dimensions without needing a Kekkei Genkai or a Shinjutsu. If you're caught up with Boruto, this chakra nature might be necessary in order to save Naruto's life, because right now he's being kept within a dimension where time never passes, so he stays in suspended animation, and there's no guarantee the dimension will work the same if the guy who trapped him there loses his power, which could leave Naruto stuck and starving if time resumes in there. But the biggest risk is that if time stays still, even after Kawaki is taken out, then if nobody finds another way to get there, Naruto will never unfreeze, and that's the same thing as a game over, because it's the same as saying he'll never come back to life. So let's go over why this chakra nature would exist in Naruto's power system, what it would do, and what evidence there is that it exists in the story already. To start, let's go over what it means to exist in a dimension without time. Depending on how the story world works, different series use the word time to label different mechanics. In Doctor Who, time refers to an organically balanced log of hypothetical events that would happen because of each other, causing various universes at different moments in time to form that then reinforce that log. So this idea of time is set in stone by a bunch of different worlds existing simultaneously that resemble different periods of time and that then affect or override each other based on how their time periods relate to each other and depending on the situation. While it can change, time is prescriptive. But the basic definition of time outside of Doctor Who would be the descriptive sequence in which events occur. Time can be faster in some regions of space than others because more moments are happening the closer you are to that area, because rather than a tunnel people move through, what we use the word time to describe is a bunch of individual updates that happen centered around specific parts of the interconnected world at different locations, where they might have different frequencies of occurring. Instead of the log being a spine that universes branch from, the log would just be a record we keep to keep track of all the individual moments of new developments that existence happens through. Despite what Jura says, this is dangerous for Naruto because at least his mortal incarnation is not alive right now. When time is frozen, nobody is alive because no moments of existence for any of those people are happening. If you had a dog that existed for 0 seconds, you didn't have a dog. I could say I've been the most subscribed person on Patreon for 0 seconds, and that statement is true because I've never been the most subscribed person on Patreon. Not enough people are signing up for the Discord server or the cool extra content on there. Normally, when someone's no longer alive, it means their body's no longer able to be a foundation for further moments where that person exists. Even if you repair the body, there's the possibility their existence depended on a specific rhythm of activity within their brain that's already been disrupted even after you bring those cells back to life again. The difference with Naruto is that every rhythm of his body's functionality has been paused before they could be individually disrupted. So if they're all resumed at once, they can keep sustaining each other. It's like an outline for his next moment of existence has been preserved in Kawaki's dimension, but Naruto himself doesn't exist again until that outline executes the next instructions within it. You can see the same logic in game development. When you anchor objects to be parts of the map, they look like an animal or a tree, but they're hollow. There's no internal functioning happening within them. They just act as a collective, empty boundary that gives the movable objects in the game more complications to work with. All the substance happens within the stuff that you don't inject manually, but when they're guided by the details you manually put there. So any detail you directly write into a game doesn't exist, but it's more like it's a foundation for complexity to branch from, as the chain reactions from them are where the contents of your game exist. The reason this is important to clarify is that it also explains the inspiration for Naruto's power system. The idea of yin and yang is that they're opposite forces that power the universe and complement each other. The smallest building block or detail could be seen as a combination or result of them, so cycles of yin and yang are within every part of physical reality, even if you can't see them. But there's a difference between cosmological yin and yang and applied yin and yang. Mathematics is useful for analyzing things, but the ability to quantify values comes from how numbers aren't prescriptive rules that define reality. They show up all the time because they're descriptive patterns that result from whatever those rules are. So you could say they exist not because they're hard written into the universe, but because they're circular logic that can help a person who keeps their properties in mind efficiently evaluate things they see that result from the source code of the universe. In a similar way, there's value in seeing anything as a unity of complementary complementary forces. If you're the type with low situational awareness, it could be helpful to keep in mind that when you go to a restaurant, as nice as the atmosphere is, you can't get lost in it, because not only are you increasing your bill with each item you order, but if you're somewhere like this JJK cafe in Japan, you might be limited to a time slot you can't go over. And just like with math, this circular logic you're using to divide anything into two complementary factors can be used on any way you break down or define reality, because it's describing reality. So even though there isn't really a reason for it, you could also frame your meal at that restaurant as both the food you're enjoying and the result of you ordering off the menu. For this reason, while the mechanics of the universe are kept vague, Hunter x Hunter's power system seems to take after an applied version of the cycle of yin and yang. There are noticeable limits to what Nen types can do, despite what should be possible given how the categories are described. So there are additional complications from reasons that we haven't been told yet that prevent applications of the Nen categories from being as achievable as they'd sound. And everything lines up if you see Hatsu as really intricate combinations of 6 really small building blocks, where those building blocks are just 6 specific ways you can conceptually frame how you apply the universal properties of your life energy, because manual motor control is tough. At the top, we have enhancement, which, similar to the idea of yang, seems to amplify and provide support to things, but by concentrating your aura to reinforce some functionality that already exists. And at the bottom, we have specialization, which, similar to the idea of yin, seems to create new concepts and bring complexity to things by branching new opportunities to apply aura again around the functionality of something that already exists. Then in between those categories are the ones that fit the traits of other phases of a cycle. Naruto has a similar ring with chakra types, but it does the opposite. It builds its whole setting out of a collage of different mythologies that power the universe, so chakra taps into actual wider forces that allow reality to exist. The 5 elements that would describe the phases of a life cycle are substituted for other traditional physical elements, and changes in chakra nature attach materials to their broader concepts, because in Naruto, the cosmologies of the concepts it draws from are real. They're combined and twisted to be cohesive and explain one setting. Those elements would be aspects of all reality, like the RG and B values of any digital picture, so they're always layered over anything, and a change in chakra nature lets you resonate with the properties of one and manipulate concentrations of a physical material it's tied to. And similarly, yin and yang would be genuine forces that power all of physical existence. That would be why standard ninjutsu, combinations of yin release and yang release, often let you do things like temporarily breathe life into or change the appearances of objects. You're manipulating and amplifying the yin and yang levels within both the physical and conceptual existences of targets around you to temporarily complicate them without permanently overriding their core traits or functionality. When fused like a Kekkei Genkai, yin and yang release lets you create entirely new cycles, which is how the Sage of Six Paths can breathe permanent new life into Kaguya's chakra and create the souls of the tailed beasts, which are immortal and reappear on Earth whenever someone tries to get rid of them. On their own, yang release and yin release have their similarities to enhancement and specialization, but only in application, because yin and yang provide chakra but only describe the patterns of uses of nen. Yang release is helpful for surgeries and healing purposes because it strengthens things. If you apply the change in chakra nature to the energy that surrounds your hand, it can reinforce the functionality of whatever human body you need to arrange pieces of or extract poisons from. So when you move your hand around someone's insides, you'll push the organs and pieces of the vital system aside without them breaking or tearing. On the opposite end, you could use yang release to target vital points, because if you leave the body's systems intact, you can use them to chain react an effect that shuts down the whole thing. That's why my favorite use of chakra would be combat medical jutsu. The effect of the change in chakra nature only suppresses some of the impact of a strike, so it's a flex of a trade-off for how powerful it is, because if you're smart with it, you can isolate the right impacts of that strike so they become even more precise by being indirectly impactful. Human bodies are vulnerable and convoluted, with a bajillion overlapping processes they need to keep running in order to stay alive. So nerfing your own output to selectively target aspects of the body to get it to shut itself down, or save on stamina costs, seems like the most interesting field of jutsu. We got one fight with this before it went back to Rasengans and tailed beasts. Yin release is helpful for manipulation and draws from complexity. You could imagine it splitting someone's chakra into a bunch of strings that, instead of having a physical presence, act as vacuums drawing other chakra in to guide what shapes it makes. Any fights about outreading another person, prying open whatever holes they have in their facade until you can see the gaps in their thought process and then lead them to tangle parts of their own awareness without them realizing, so you make them even easier to read. And just like with Nen and cursed energy, the flame-like wave chakra emits from a person's body comes from their subconscious, which is much more complex but much less consciously questioned than their manual thoughts. So using Yin release, if you concentrate on a target, you can pull on the ends of their chakra and lead those flame-like tendrils to tie themselves into knots, using the two-way connection to tie the aspects of awareness those flames come from into knots as well. So their behavior ends up benefiting you and undermining their own goals. Although if someone realizes this and releases a pulse of chakra, they can usually shake most of the tangles out that you've placed on them. And that flex of a trade-off is why Genjutsu is my second favorite use of chakra, even though the story never goes into detail with it. Anyway, as forces behind the existence of the universe, Yin and Yang themselves would be the providers of the concept of opportunity and the concept of actualization. Rather than something like front half and back half, Yin would provide a cavity, some structure or direction for the contents of existence to fill, like space, and Yang would provide the stability and level it's filled, like momentum. That's why Yang release makes chakra reinforce whatever it phases through, or lets you boost regenerative abilities, or gives a temporarily enlarged body the physical strength to fit its larger size. And that's also why for combined jutsu, when Yin release turns into a bunch of strings, Yang release can actualize them in an impactful form, like with Shikamaru's shadows or puppet jutsu. You could see Yin and Yang as the sources of the direction and magnitude of a vector, or for a computer, the transistor itself with its default off state, and then the charge that sets it to an on state. But there's something missing with this power system the way it is. If chakra lets you echo reality's building blocks, and Naruto twists its fusion of cosmology to make it coherent, for a setting that's been described as a bubble within a higher plane of existence, Naruto's Yin and Yang should be the fundamental concepts that by implication layer to make everything else. The ideas should be simple but able to combine behind the scenes to make everything within the world work just from what those ideas mean on their own. Why existence happens, and how their combination creates the world we see with the rules it has. And that's not the case. Sure, there's structure and vitality to anything you see, but those are disjointed ideas, and then there's some unclear middle bullshit that would have to explain why for some reason the specific world of Naruto happens to exist from that vagueness. It should be more downhill, where some self-described harmony of forces is so comprehensive that the world can just be explained as one insignificant chain reaction among many others that naturally makes sense from it. The way it stands, it's like reducing an equation and still feeling like there's more because part of it is still a giant polynomial. But if there is an additional factor, we shouldn't even see it because this property would be the one that helps frame the others as discernible cycles that exist within the world they also fundamentally create. It would be the least intuitive of the three factors and would make the most sense if it's tied to environmental or dimensional differences, because then its involvement would be behind the locations people exist in and notice the other properties of the universe through. And this makes sense because there's still one property missing from those comparisons to vectors and computers. No actual vector exists with just a direction and a magnitude. The combination of a direction and magnitude can't define any specific vector, just the abstract concept of a vector with those specifications. Just like how in computers, the blueprint of a transistor means nothing when every single computer that actually exists is a combination of specific manufactured transistors hooked up together. Any vector that exists on any graph or as a description of physical reality has a direction, a magnitude, and a relative environment. If you want to implement the abstract concept of a vector, you need all three. Any vector that's drawn on a graph specifically exists on that copy of that graph, along with any other vectors drawn with it, and they all share that common space as their relative environment property. Naruto's body might be frozen, and he might not exist at the moment, but he's a specific guy who can be brought back because his body is still in some specific environment that itself continues to exist, connected to the other dimensions time passes in. So if Naruto's chakra natures include every self-contained concept that prescribe existence in combination, they would have to be at least 8. The 5 stages of a life cycle, the detail something can exist with, the stability it has to continue existing over the passage of time, and the relative environment it exists in connected to other concepts. A hypothetical detail is no longer a hypothetical detail to the other details in the hypothetical question. You layer that further, and now you have a multiverse with separate spaces and speeds of time, but with consistent mechanics and noticeable combinations of structure and substance. With these 8 pieces, every aspect of every concept of every layer of rules in Naruto's setting can be more or less derived, because now, even though they're still abstract and wouldn't actually explain how the setting realistically exists in detail without heavy lifting from the plane of reality beyond what we've seen so far, the specific disjointed mechanics and balancing issues that stand out among the details we've already been told are a bit more cohesive. Naruto's intentional world design lines up more if we assume Chakra can tap into an 8th concept we haven't been told about. And maybe it's only so unclear for me at least, because we were never even explained the ideas behind Yin and Yang release in the story itself. It kinda just assumed those who cared would figure them out on their own. Anyway, if there is another basic chakra nature anyone can learn, provided they realize it exists, it would have the effect of shifting something's relative environment, like swapping what universe it's in, or even teleporting it across spatial coordinates. If it's a muscle people don't realize they can use, then Obito's Kamui just becomes an automatic hiding ability that's way easier to counter if you see through it, and the Rinnegan would let someone move that muscle indirectly through its natural ability to use everything. The same way Obito even learned to use Kamui to even teleport to other dimensions. The Otsutsuki are colonizers, and a design choice that lines up with that is if they use unfair resources and an older history of technological and theoretical advancement to have overwhelming power over smaller communities that are less experienced with the same scale of travel. So along with the Ten Tails and their karma marks, if they know there's an invisible factor of the universe to account for that younger civilizations don't, they can exploit that to travel and conquer wherever they want while seeming unstoppable. Kaguya uses a fancy portal screen technique, but if it's just an ancient way of tapping into a chakra nature only the Otsutsuki know about, then it makes sense a karma vessel like Boruto or Kawaki can use a looser form of it when they gain an Otsutsuki's muscle memory. The Otsutsuki teleportation jutsu line up more with a field of jutsu like medical ninjutsu or genjutsu than anything else. And speaking of lining up, the mechanics of chakra itself fit better if this building block exists. Chakra is an energy that causes effects as you send it out into the world, but it's still tied to the specific people it comes from and will return to them through the environment to be used again as their stamina recovers. It's because of this way that it works that if somebody steals part of their chakra away, it will reduce their max energy and still be tied to them when it reappears. And why if someone has a kid, they might lose some of their energy by passing it on. The tailed beasts can always come back to life after losing their forms because their chakra is eternally tied to them, and chakra never disappears. It just disperses when it's used and requires time and intervention to concentrate again into an amount that would be big enough for a tailed beast's rhythm to function through, which is the only thing they need to live since they're made of chakra itself. In order to apply chakra, you need to harmonize the passages of energy through your mind and body, which are tied to yin and yang. But if you realize the unintuitive fact that chakra comes to you through the environment, you can harmonize the passage of energy through nature around you as well, to add nature's energy to your attacks and evolve them to the next level. It would fit more cleanly if there's another building block of the universe and matching chakra type this source of energy can be aligned with. And the skill is called Sage Mode, because it's unclear to people that the fact the world around them is interconnected is itself something to appreciate and become aware of. It takes attunement and wisdom to unlock this, just like the theory and awareness gap a civilization would have to cross in order to make the discovery of a chakra nature holding dimensions together. Naruto's world is just beginning to modernize, so it makes sense if one thing they still haven't figured out to reach intergalactic level is that another fundamental branch of jutsu exists. Although it's not just intergalactic level, there's even a multiverse, which makes more sense for Naruto's setting if the explanation is that relative environment is a fluid force behind it like the others. So to go over everything once again, Naruto's world makes a lot more intuitive sense if there's a chakra nature and matching building block of reality humans haven't discovered. It would line up with the methods for releasing chakra, the reason there's a multiverse in the first place, and the theming of the Otsutsuki. It would make Naruto's cosmology more self-prescribing and cohesive, and it would balance techniques like Kamui by giving them an undiscovered weakness. And if this is true, then even without Kawaki's help, you can still rescue Naruto as long as you give this field enough research. And speaking of research, every month I look into something new that you vote on in the Patreon. And this month, at your request, I'm learning how to make a fursona, so join if that's up your alley.